Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we talked to Amy Btiebet Washington about living well with Crohn's disease, self-care, choosing the right provider and the right tribe, how vulnerability can create connections, and how sometimes you just gotta have that craft beer. Cheers. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bowel Moments podcast. I am Alicia Barron, and I am joined by
Robin Kingham
and Amy Btiebet Washington.
Yay. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy. We are going to start out by telling everybody what we're drinking, because this is not only about a podcast about inflammatory bowel disease, it's about inflammatory bowel disease while drinking alcohol. So we like to loosen everybody up. We want to hear your unfiltered stories. So I currently am drinking a gin and tonic. Robin, what are you drinking?
Robin, I am drinking Prosecco.
Delightful. And Amy, what about you?
I am drinking a vodka and seltzer, but I usually drink craft beer like IPAs, but because of my IBD, I should not be drinking it. Oh, no. So I save that for the weekends when I can recover.
Got it. May I dare I ask what your symptoms are from drinking?
Just all the typical nausea, having to go to the bathroom. So that's like the Saturday night carried over to Sunday morning beverage.
Right. You're like, I'm going to have a special moment with this beer, and where it's going to last a little bit, and I'm going to embrace it. I like it.
I'm the opposite. I usually drink cider all the time. Like, that's my drink of choice because it doesn't bother me. And I usually don't drink any other kind of alcohol because I have the symptoms from anything else. So I usually just stick to vodka. I'm hoping that Prosecco with the bubbles will be the same as the cider.
I'm just boring, unfortunately. So I tend to drink wine for the most part. But today I did get excited about a gin and tonic because it's summer. It's sort of refreshing. But I also, unfortunately, with celiac disease, I can't drink beer either. And every once in a while, I really want to because it smells so good. But then I'm not willing to have the morning after that comes with that. So I'm not willing to do it. Well, Amy, we're really excited to have you join us. Tell us a little bit about your story and sort of how you came into our community.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed in 2012. I don't think that it's an IBD story unless you have a super traumatic experience to just kick things off. So no one in my family has Crohn's or colitis, so I wasn't really familiar with the disease. And it was early in 2012. I thought I had the stomach flu. At the time I was working with kids. And so, it was like the first year that I was working there. So I thought, I just wasn't used to all the germs and thought I had the stomach flu, took a day off work. It was really early in my career there, so I didn't want to take too much time off. Went back to work, wasn't feeling 100%, and then decided to take another half day off. And I was living with my parents at the time, and I was laying on the couch watching TV, and all of a sudden, I couldn't stop shaking. I was freezing cold and couldn't get warm. And my dad, fortunately, was home from work that day, and he put like 5 blankets on me, and I still couldn't get warm. And I said, something is really wrong. You need to get me to the hospital. And so he called 911. They got me in the ambulance, and I had 105, 106 degree temperature. Was later found out I had sepsis and was in ICU for about 5 days, and then the hospital for another 3 or 4, just out of ICU. And during that time, of course, they ran tons and tons of tests. And finally, they sent in a GI doc, and he said, I think that you have Crohn's disease. And making the connection from stomach flu, sepsis to Crohn's disease just felt like a huge jump to me. And so once I was out of the hospital, I actually got a second and third opinion throughout the course of time, and then finally got a colonoscopy and was diagnosed in mid-March of 2012. And yeah, again, nobody in my family had IBD. And so it was just a lot of kind of asking people questions, Google searching, and I was feeling pretty good after my diagnosis when I went on some maintenance medication.
There are some definite parallels. I was 25 when I was diagnosed. I ended up in the hospital like right away, not in the ICU at that time, but definitely is not an IBD diagnosis without a traumatic entrance. Traumatic and dramatic entrance into the community.
Like, here I am, and I'm not going away ever.
That's right. right.
Yeah, well, and it's hard because it seems like they have to sort of rule a bunch of stuff out. So it takes longer than you anticipate to sort of get that diagnosis, unless they just had scoped you right away and were like, "Oh yeah, this is definitely what it was." But
Well,
it
How
seems
did
like
you?
it's a
I have a
process.
follow-up question. I'm sorry, Alicia. I didn't mean to
You're
interrupt you.
fine.
So why? How did you go develop sepsis? Did you have like
Mhm.
perforations? Like there?
Yeah, so their explanation at the time was I apparently, at some point in the days leading up to when I started feeling sick, had some sort of raw meat that somehow slipped into my bloodstream through any sort of
Yep. Yep.
perforation.
Perforation.
Um, and that's what caused it, which is crazy because we know
Wow.
that it can lie dormant for a long time before something like that kind of triggers the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
would that have, and again, correct, again, everyone keep in mind that I'm not the one with inflammatory bowel disease. So would that be from fistulizing, or is it just the nature of Crohn's disease?
I honestly don't know.
Okay, that's all right. You're not a doctor either, so you don't have to know this. But I was just curious if, like, if it would had been fistulizing in your body and you didn't know what was going on. That's like kind of creepy.
Yeah, and I think at the time we were my family and I were so new to the diagnosis and the disease as a whole, like we didn't know what questions to ask. It was kind of like, okay, so if this is really what's happening, let's just get on medication and then pray for the best.
When you went to go get your like second and third opinions, did everybody say the same thing, or were you getting other options?
Yeah, so everybody said the same thing, and I think at that point, that's what I wanted to hear. Everybody kind of saying the same thing.
Mhm.
I think because I didn't have a family history, because I was and still am I live a very healthy and active lifestyle. It just wasn't anything. Not that that makes a difference, but in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm the healthy one in my family. Like I exercise and I eat right, and so and fortunately, by the third IBD specialist that I saw, I had found the doctor that is still my current doctor and who I felt really comfortable with. So that was a huge part of it too. The first two that I saw I didn't necessarily feel like it was a good fit for me personally.
I would
It
actually like
really
you to
is.
elaborate on that. Getting the second and third opinion and then
Yeah.
finding the right doctor for you, because I had to go through a couple of doctors too, but before I found the doctor that was the right fit. And they were all great doctors and they were all specialists and they were all like the best. But just because they are the best doesn't mean they're the best for you.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And I
I would
think,
like you to like talk about that a little bit in detail if you don't mind.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's honestly, I compare it to going to therapy and finding the right therapist to talk to. I know that I'm going to be on a journey with this person for a really long time, and it's not just a physical thing; it's emotional, it's mental. And so the first specialist that I saw, and they were all great. The first one that I saw, he was very technical and scientific, and didn't, and not that I needed a bedside manner, but he was kind of cold and very direct. And then the second specialist I saw is a wonderful woman, who I still know really well to this day, but for whatever reason, she was very fixated on talking to me about pregnancy and IBD and starting a family. And at the time, this wasn't something that was on my radar. And so for her to fixate on that, it kind of just turned me off a little bit. And then the third doctor, who is my current specialist, he was the perfect combination of direct and soft, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
He was very to the point, but very kind in his delivery. I needed somebody that wasn't going to beat around the bush, but that was also, when I needed him to give me a little bit more of a softer side, a softer approach, and that's him. And he actually provided a lot of volunteering opportunities for me as well as it relates to IBD. He helped me find a community of support, which was really helpful at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's it's always good to find a doctor that is the right fit for you, and it's hard because it isn't a one size fits all. The doctor that you like is perhaps not the doctor that Robin would go
Right.
for or that I would go for if we were in the same situation. And it's funny, I joke to people that I think it's kind of like dating, that it's like
Yeah.
you this is a very long-term relationship you're probably going to have with this person, and so you want to make sure that it's somebody who feels right and who can have that relationship with you. And so I think I'm glad you found somebody that you can have that relationship with, because it does take a little bit of time. And I think people feel bad and guilty for leaving a doctor.
The people that are most interesting to me are parents of pediatric patients when they don't want to get a second opinion because
Mm.
they don't want to hurt their child's doctor's feelings and they don't want it to affect the care for their child's doctor. And so That's always an interesting conversation to have. And with Alicia saying it's like dating. So with parents, I always tell them your child has to be able to have a relationship with their physician. So you can't manage their relationship with their physician, even though they're a pediatric patient. They have to be able to talk to their doctors because they're going to be talking to these doctors for the rest of their lives. So I want to emphasize that point of finding the doctor that's right for you.
Yeah.
Right.
And Robin,
Whoever's
I don't know.
listening, find the doctor that's right for you.
Yeah, I don't know if this was your experience too, Robin, but like when I first met with my now doctor, he said to me, if I tell you something and you want to get a second or third opinion, please by all means do so. And I think that that was just like such a great indicator of a doctor that didn't have an ego and
Yeah.
really understood. I don't know. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but I heard it's not uncommon.
I think it's specific to IBD specialists more so than just the general GI community. If you're not seeing an IBD specialist, so my current doctor, who I adore, the first time that I met with her, she's like, if you want to return to care with your community GI, I'm happy to work with that person. So I was like, no, you will be my provider from now until the end of time. Even if I have to travel, get on planes, drive 6, 7, 10 hours to see you, I will be doing that. But I feel like most IBD specialists in those kind of situations welcome the input. I mean,
Yeah.
they welcome that second and third pair of eyes.
Yeah. Any doctor, frankly, any doctor worth their salt
Yes.
will say, go get a second opinion, because, if they truly believe what they're doing is right for you, they know that the next person is going to say the same thing, and that you'll come back to them if it's the right move. And sadly, the IBD specialists don't have any lack of patients. And so it's not like if you leaving is going to make some sort of giant hole in their practice that nobody can fill. Not that you guys are not unique, remarkable unicorns of people.
No, but
That's not what I'm saying.
There are 3 million of us. There are plenty of us to go around.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that I'm glad you sort of came back to that, because I was also going to ask the same question. It was like, how did you finally decide? But I think, you, like you said, you sort of just kind of have a gut feeling of like, this is the person I'm meant to be with because of these sort of situations. And then you handed him a ring and said, please never leave me forever.
Right. Will you please be my IBD specialist down on one knee?
Actually, no, you handed him your insurance card and said, please be my IBD doctor forever, instead of an engagement ring, sadly. You mentioned this a little bit about taking care of yourself. And I know that this is, and in conversations with me before, you talked a lot about self-care and taking care of yourself. So I know that must have changed, obviously, after you were diagnosed. So you were already taking good care of yourself. What sort of became more important to you after you were diagnosed?
So guilty of being a type A personality over here. And when I got my diagnosis, I was told myself, well, this isn't going to stop me from doing everything that I normally would have. Just kidding. So I think initially it was trying to continue with my routine, which has always been helpful. Getting up and exercising every morning has been really helpful to me, just to clear my mind. And this was before my diagnosis too, especially in working with youth, having gone through traumatic experiences. That was a part of my de-stressing from my previous job. But as I came to learn, my body wasn't always ready to exercise first thing in the morning. And so that started to cause me a lot of anxiety. And so the anxiety led me to therapy. And therapy, I cannot say enough about how life-changing it's been for me. Fortunately, the first person that I met was the person that I still see today. I don't see her regularly, but when I need her, she's there. I've had a rough couple of months, so I'm back on her calendar. But for that first year and a half after my diagnosis, she really helped me to cope with facing the reality that there were going to be times that my body wasn't agreeing with what my mind wanted me to do. And so definitely therapy. And then I know that this is still really hard for me. Like I said about the beer thing, self-care is indulging sometimes when I know that it's a safe time to do that. So I really love craft beer, but I reserve that for special times on the weekends. And then I don't know. I don't want to say the superficial self-care things like getting a massage, because, that's not really dealing with some of these deep internal issues, but knowing when to turn things off and taking a day for myself, even if that's just watching TV or sitting on the couch. But yeah, so I would say probably the four biggest things are figuring out when to take time for myself, eating as best as I can, keeping my exercise routine, and therapy. 100% the most important for me has been therapy. And a part of that therapy is really opening up to other people that have IBD too. And I'm sure, Robin, you probably feel the same. Like I have my girls and my own support group that I lean on heavily.
Yeah. Well, and I'm really glad you brought up therapy because I think, there's still, sadly, even in this day and age, there's still stigma attached to going to therapy, and people assume that something, really terrible must have happened. And I think people need to recognize is that IBD is life-changing. There is no cure. This is now your best friend that's going to be with you all the time. And so you
Yeah,
have to, okay, well, fine. This is your passenger on your journey for the rest of your life. And so you are going to have to figure out how to live with this new reality. And I think, one of the things that I think is really important is helping people recognize that there's a grief process that goes along with a chronic illness diagnosis because it changes your life. And so I think it's, getting a practitioner who can help you sort of talk about that and work through that and sort of come up with strategies for how you're going to reframe who you are and kind of maybe reframe what you expected of your life because of this thing, and not to minimize your life or not to sort of change it in a way that's making it less of what you wanted, but just helping you do exactly like you said, trying to figure out how do you restructure your thinking around your expectations of what your body can do and sort of and how you deal with your anxiety and stress and things like that. So I can't say enough good things about therapy. I say this as somebody who is a social worker who also just despises getting therapy for myself. So do as I say, not as I do kind of situation over here. So I think it's wonderful. Everybody else go get therapy, and I'll continue to be the hot mess I am over here.
I will say though, as someone who is new to trying to find a therapist after my experience in December, with surgery and everything, because of the pandemic, therapists availability few and far between. Like I cannot find somebody who can fit me in. And I'm like, please, I actually want to talk to somebody and not just myself about this. And I'm sure my husband's tired of listening to me talk about almost dying. Can someone listen?
It's so funny that not funny. It's not funny. It's interesting that you say that because I had therapy earlier this morning, and my therapist and I were having a conversation about that, like how the demand is so high after COVID, people trying to readjust to getting back to normal life, but the therapy is just not available to them. It's heartbreaking.
Anyone who's listening, therapists should be nationally certified and not be forced to work in just a state by state basis.
Right. Well, and reimbursement for therapy needs to be much more,
Yes.
much easier for therapists. I mean, I know the therapist I saw in Houston, she didn't do insurance at all. It was straight out of pocket just because it was so difficult for her to go through the insurance companies to get reimbursed. And so she was wonderful and worth absolutely every penny I paid her, but it still hurt a little bit every time, which then I talked to her about in therapy. So at least there was a mechanism for that.
My stress is caused by money problems because of this therapy.
It didn't help matters, unfortunately, with me, but hopefully other people don't feel that way. So you mentioned having sort of talking to the community. So tell us a little bit more about sort of how did you find community? In what way do you interact with community and sort of that side of living with your Crohn's?
Yeah, so I'll start with outside of my Crohn's diagnosis. This disease has made me realize, as a woman, as a person of color, as somebody with chronic illness, there are still opportunities out there available for me to serve in a leadership role. And I think that to help other women understand that has been a big priority for me. So I do a lot of volunteering with the YWCA in our area, as well as chairing the Telos Leadership Foundation, which is a program for underrepresented youth in the area and between the ages of 19 and 24, looking to kind of figure out what their next move is in life and provide them with experiences that they wouldn't necessarily have outside of Telos, which includes mentoring and a week-long venture into the national parks where they do a lot of self-searching. And I think, my diagnosis has kind of helped me to understand that I need to help to provide others with knowing that regardless of your circumstances and situation, that you have a seat at the table. And so that's really important to me. And then probably most importantly, my volunteering led me to my current role with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. So when I was diagnosed, I was told by a friend that he was involved with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and he participated in one of their marathons. And so he connected me with the local executive director, and I got involved with the local walk here and did the walk for a couple years, and then was on their special event committee, and then was on the board, and then the executive director left. And because my background was in nonprofit work, I became the executive director a few years ago with the local chapter. And I think really just surrounding myself with people that have had similar experiences has allowed me to be more transparent, to be more vulnerable, and to help to support other newly diagnosed people. So that's definitely been a huge part of my process in understanding and accepting my diagnosis.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I love the mentoring thing, especially not, not no shade to your current job, but I love the mentoring thing in particular, just because it's, you're sort of taking what you've learned and sort of multiplying it by all these people who bring in their various different life circumstances. So it can be other chronic illnesses, it can be parental chronic illnesses or whatever. So I think that's really awesome. And, and I do think there's something to be said about working in a job that is so personally meaningful to you, because it's hard to, nonprofit work can be thankless and hard and long hours and not great pay. And so to add, in order to really feel like you're even more committed to your job and to sort of make up for those long nights and lean paychecks, it's nice to have the sort of passion that goes along with it,
Yeah.
I think.
I was not a fundraiser at all. I worked in education and nonprofit programming. And so when I got this job, I was like, I don't like asking people for money, but if it's something that I'm passionate about, it makes it a little bit easier. Yeah. So I don't know that I could do fundraising in a different nonprofit.
You'd probably learn, but no, it wouldn't be it's certainly the message would be delivered in a different way. I think, it would be a lot harder.
Yes. So from our previous conversation before we pressed record, know that you are married and that your husband is also a patient.
Yeah. So I met my husband 5.5 years ago, and right before we went on our first date, this was kind of before Instagram was super popular. It was more like the Facebook time. He saw that we both followed some sort of Crohn's colitis Facebook group when he was creeping on my Facebook. And so right before our first date, he asked me if I had Crohn's disease. And before going on a first date, that's kind of an intimidating question. So I said yes, because I was very open about it. And he said, so do I. And it just immediately, like going into our first date, made me feel like I was kind of 10 steps ahead of where I would have been had I not been on a date with somebody that had IBD. There's a different sort of comfort level in knowing that the person that you're with shares a lot of similar uncomfortable and potentially embarrassing things that are happening to your body. So like there was just kind of this sense of relief when we had that conversation before our first date. And it took some of the pressure off of having to have it on our first date. So he was diagnosed when he was in high school, and he was an athlete, and it significantly affected his collegiate athlete career. He manages without medicine now. So I would say between the both of us, it's just really important for us to watch our diet the best that we can, since he is not on any medication. But it's definitely like, we know there are certain things that both of us have to kind of keep in mind because we live with this. Like, for example, for whatever reason, both of us get a little bit more stressed out and need to use the bathroom more frequently if we know we have to catch a flight. So, and Robin, I don't know if you've experienced this before, we always have to give ourselves a lot more time before getting to the airport or at the airport, because somebody always has to go to the bathroom right before we get on the flight. And, not being able to on a flight is an awful experience. Or, like we always have to make sure that we have expensive toilet paper in our house.
That is key. Toilet paper is key.
Yeah. Yeah. But these things that somebody that doesn't live with a diagnosis wouldn't really understand. We never really had to have those explicit conversations. You just kind of know.
Right.
That is kind of nice to have that shortcut in your relationship.
Yeah. And now he's, fully involved in my work because I've just pulled him in, and such a wonderful support to me in the work that I do. So it's very personal to my whole family.
Yeah. Again, working in nonprofit, my husband is very used to being voluntold,
Yeah.
because even though he is not connected to, what I do, he has become so because of the fact that I'm like, here, you're going to show up on this day at this time and do this thing, because I have to do it. And I need somebody and nobody else is showing up.
Yep, yep. Makes it a little bit easier for him though, because he does have a direct connection. So I think he'd probably feel guilty if he didn't.
That's so
As
funny.
he should.
Mhm.
As he
I am curious though, again, we don't know why people get IBD. We know there is a genetic component to it. Is that something that you guys discussed when you got into your relationship, is sort of with you both having it?
Yeah, definitely. I remember maybe a couple years into our relationship, I had asked one of my pediatric GI friends if the risk was higher in having children because both parents had IBD. And his answer was kind of like, don't let that deter you from having children.
Hmm.
I don't know that he knew a specific statistic, but he wanted us to feel comfortable in the decision to have children, which is reassuring because I think, I don't know what fertility or infertility looks like to a lot of other IBD patients, but for us, it has been a journey. We spent the good part of a year trying to get pregnant. And of course, I had to go through some additional testing that was one of the most actually uncomfortable things that I've ever experienced in my life. One of the tests that they did to make sure that my tubes were completely clear of inflammation after my surgery. And so that was very expensive and very painful. And then, having to connect with my IBD specialist to make sure that I was ready and okay with staying on my current medication. But the journey has been tough. Sometimes with a chronic illness, you always have that small dark cloud that follows you around a little bit.
I have two daughters that are adults, 24 and 22, and I had them before I was diagnosed, before I had any symptoms. And I actually believe that it was the pregnancies that triggered my
Mm.
disease, the stress on my body. But I got remarried 12 years ago and we did not prevent pregnancy.
Mm.
But I had to tell him when we first got together that there very good chance that we wouldn't be able to have kids together. And because he had never been married, had no children of his own, and we were in our early 30s, so it was very easy for us to consider having kids. It wasn't like we got married at, me getting remarried at 40 or later, and we had to come to terms with the fact that it wasn't going to happen for us unless we wanted to pursue medical intervention, and that wouldn't even be a guarantee.
Right, right. And the stress that can put on things too. I mean, it's one thing to cope with infertility, but on top of that, knowing that once you do get pregnant, there are so many complications that can happen too. And I'm sorry that you had to have that conversation because it's not an easy one. And trying to explain that to somebody else too, it's tough. It's tough. So
Well, and there is something also very, oh gosh, trying to go through all of those tests, like it's a heartbreaking experience in so many ways, because it's, you sort of are poked and prodded and intervened with,
yeah,
and that's hard. And you're so used to doing it already. Unfortunately, when you have a chronic illness, you're already used to being poked and
yes,
prodded, and then you have to
yeah,
add this on top of it. So
yeah. But fortunately, just like finding the right IBD specialist, I found a wonderful OB throughout this process that has really taken the time to understand my previous health history and really taken such a close look at everything that I've gone through personally that it's made it a lot more hopeful for me.
good. Yeah, I think
That
that's really key, is to try to find somebody who's willing to sort of become part of your team. Because I think it's, you when you have a chronic illness, these become your healthcare team, not just your GI doctor and your OB-GYN. It's like everybody, all of that's working together. So you have to have a team of people that are willing to sort of try to figure out your overall health, and then you get your potentially rheumatologist and your dentist and all these people that end up kind
Yeah.
of having to be part of your world.
Pathologist and
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh,
poor
right? Like,
Robin.
yeah, but I will also share my women group that I connect with regularly. There's 5 of us, and one of them went through an incredibly similar experience last summer that she shared openly with us. Just having that support group has been life-changing for me.
Yep. I think there is, certainly something to be said about having those people around you and speaking it, like there is power in speaking these
Yeah.
things out into the universe and then also finding your tribe that goes along with it. I
Yeah,
kind of
I
wish.
was gonna ask Robin, I know that you guys are asking me questions, but um,
Ask
do you
away.
do you feel like because of your IBD journey, it's very easy for you to be transparent about your health in general? I found it so easy for me to do that now.
Yes, 100%. And it also gives me, I feel like I can give other people permission to be transparent with me and make them feel safe talking about their experience. Even my parents, even my parents, my dad has had some health issues lately, and he was talking to me very openly about, bowel movements, everything. And my stepmom was like, Louie, because you're taught you don't talk
Yeah,
about that kind of
yeah,
stuff. And I just looked at her and I said, I talk about poop all day long. My poop, other people's poop. I would really like to know about my dad's poop to
yeah,
make sure he's
yeah.
okay.
You
So I
gave
don't
him,
mind him talking about poop with me.
you gave him that safe space to know that it's
Yes.
okay to talk about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, even, I don't know if you had this experience growing up, but like if you're going on a long trip or whatever, everybody has to go to the bathroom before they get in the car and everybody has to do my kids always joke that they never had to experience that because I always had to go to the bathroom 10 minutes after
Or
we
they
left the
did.
house.
Yeah,
No matter,
yeah, yes,
no matter if
yes,
we all went or not, I
yep.
still had to go. So like they never had that kind of shared experience as their friends of like, everybody has to go to the bathroom before we leave the house and everybody has to, wait till you get home to go to the bathroom because your parents don't want you using the bathroom in public or whatever that is. I'm like, wherever we are, we need to find the closest bathroom.
What a
Like
silver lining for them.
I don't know if it was or not, but it was just the reality of the situation. They're right. Mom will have to go to the bathroom. If I'm driving in the car and I start singing, they know to start looking for a bathroom because I'm trying to keep my mind off of having to go to the bathroom. I
Yep.
mean, there's just like certain cues.
Know that feeling.
Interesting that you asked though if because of her diagnosis and it like has made her more open to talking about it because it's that I had not put that together and I've known Robin now for several years, but she has always been like open about talking about what's going on with her and sort of and how she's had to change her diet and the things that are going on with her disease but she's like that with everybody, and so I think you're right, it gives people permission to sort of say, well, this is the thing that's going on with me too, and so I think, but I hadn't put that together. So I'm really glad you said that because yeah, I see that with other people too. Not everybody, but I see that with
Yeah,
some of
yeah.
our folks.
And then I think, do people think, oh God, here comes this oversharer again that's just going to tell us way too much about her personal life that I don't care about?
I don't think that that's the case.
No.
I don't think that that's the case because the isolation is what makes it hard.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
yes,
found that when I started talking about it really openly, not just to people around me, but like really just far and wide, running down the street screaming, no colon, still rolling. Like people were like, oh, there are other people like me.
Yeah.
And
you're so
so
right.
even
Yeah.
if they couldn't talk about people in their circle about it, they would reach out to me separately, to share their story just with me, to have somebody to talk to about it.
Well, and it's like with everything in life, that isolation is the hardest part with anything, not just disease, anything else, to know that somebody else is going through it and you're not alone it can just be such a comfort.
Yeah. Well, and I think vulnerability opens up vulnerability. Like when you're talking about something, it allows other people to say, "Yeah, that happened to me too," or
Mhm.
"I have," or "this thing happened to me instead." And so I think, and again, that goes back to like talking about disease, talking about these difficult, tough subjects that used to be taboo, and thank goodness they're getting less and less so. But when you are open about that, people respond with their own vulnerability and by opening themselves up to that experience. So I think that's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You have to actually use words, Robin, not just
I
mouth
just
things because it's a
whispered it to
podcast.
myself. I just whispered it. I know you guys can see me. No one else can see me.
That's true.
But I
It just doesn't know everyone. This is a podcast.
I have to use my words. Got it. Check for next time. Note to self.
It's been a little bit since we recorded, so we're a little rusty. So
Yes.
This is great. It doesn't feel like it's recorded. It feels like a conversation with friends.
good, as it should be.
So
That's our hope.
I want to ask you, you said in our professionally created pre-interview questionnaire that we send out. Um, you also said that you had surgery.
Yes.
Just, I don't want to say just a resection. I only say just because I've actually had my entire colon removed.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, you just had a resection.
Robin's like, you had a paltry resection. Let me tell you about the removal of my colon.
And I think that's like, it's so interesting because we do that to ourselves as patients, right? I was just on a call last week with one of my board members, with my board, and one of my coworkers said, I'm giving the mission moment right now. And one of the first things she said was like kind of qualifying herself. I know I don't have it as bad as other people. Like I haven't had surgery. And we feel like we have to do that. You know, it's like almost that survivor's guilt. Like,
Yes.
I didn't have surgery, but you still have a lot of challenges, and that doesn't make you any less of an IBD patient.
Yes.
But it is interesting. Like, that's always one of the first questions that people ask. Like, did you have surgery? Like, when I finally got mine, I'm like, oh, I moved on to like the next level of patient.
That's what I say. You leveled up. It's like a video game. You leveled up.
Oh no.
Be that way, but now I'm like, well, now I feel like I'm into the the surgery group now, but it kind of came as a surprise to me because for the first 5 or 6 years after I was diagnosed, I was relatively healthy. I had to switch medication a couple of times just because of some cramping, but the summer of 2008, I believe, I developed an abscess, and I'm a runner, so I felt it very early on. And my doctor tried antibiotics, and it just kept coming back, and draining it wasn't an option. So we talked about the resection. I was scared because, in a very selfish way, of the recovery, not the surgery itself, but just type A personality, having to take time off of work, not being able to exercise the way that I wanted to, not being able to do chores around the house. Yes, Robin, I see you raising your hand because it is so tough. Like, that is the hardest part, having to rely heavily on other people. I'm a very independent person. So I had like a million questions for my surgeon, who was amazing and said, you can do all those things whenever you're ready. If your body's telling you you're ready, you can do it. So I had my surgery in October of 2018, and my recovery was pretty, I don't want to say easy, but compared to others, it was very smooth. Yeah. So I was in the hospital for, I think I had 10 inches of my ileum removed. And I was in the hospital for 4 days, and they wouldn't let me go until I passed something, gas, bowel movement, and I just couldn't. My stomach was humongous. So finally the doctor said, maybe we'll just let you go home and see if you'll feel more comfortable there. And when I got home, I told my husband to please take me to the gym because it was snowing outside. I need to walk on the treadmill because that is the only way that I'm going to be able to let some of this out. And I was at the gym for 5 minutes and went straight to the bathroom. And I walked very slow to the bathroom because I was 5 days post-op, but it was one of the best feelings in the world. So I think I took maybe a week off of work after that, and then slowly kind of got back into my routine. I have a nice scar above my belly button, but honestly, as cheesy as it sounds, I see it as a reminder of a surgery that saved my life. And I'm sure, Robin, you can kind of attest to that in a similar way. I know that people are ashamed or embarrassed of a scar, but it was something that my body needed, and I'm grateful to have been able to have the surgery.
Oh, 100%. My first surgery was the surgery to remove my colon, and it was it was a life-saving procedure. It was an emergency, not emergent. Like, they took me I was in the hospital for a couple of days, not getting better, and they're like, we're going to call in a surgical consult. And just a couple of days later, I was having surgery. So it 100% saved my life.
Yeah.
Twice now. Now I have another one that I just had in December.
Oh my gosh.
So.
I think one of the issues with surgery in general, and keep in mind, I've never had emergency abdominal surgery or even unexpected abdominal surgeries, but I think that's one of the problems with this, and that's regardless of whether you've just had it, quote unquote, I'm using my fingers to make quotes, just had a resection, or you've had to have your whole colon removed. It is usually something that is has to be decided very quickly. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you don't really have too much of an option anymore. You have to do this thing. And so it's you don't get to take that time to wrap your head around it and do your research and, and sort of get prepared for it. It's even when you prepare for it, it's pretty major, but it's like, it becomes this thing that's just like, oh my God, you have to have it done. And so it's this rush. And so it's sort of this emergent thing. And that feels different.
Blessing and a curse though, because I think if I had more time to think about it, then I would have went off the deep end, like I would have overthought it. And it's interesting too. I was talking to somebody last week that had the same surgery as me, and both of us, and I didn't realize this until she pointed it out, both of us remembered right before we went under anesthesia that the doctor said, and just so you know, there's a very small chance that you could come out with a bag, but we just want to let you know that there's a small chance and that might happen. And then they put you right under. That happened to both of us. And I don't think that it was definitely intentional to do it right at that last minute, but it was like, whoa, wait. And then you're just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're out.
They're like, night.
Yeah.
I guess rather than what you knew.
I knew. I have one right now. Hopefully it will be temporary. But yeah, I definitely knew going in that I was coming out with a bag. Yeah.
But even that, like, you knew you were having a bag, but like a lot of people don't know what
they don't.
is like. Right. You're going to get it, but that doesn't mean you've ever had one and you know what
Right.
the experience is going to be. So
never what you expect it to be anyway. Even this time around is completely different from the last time I had it. Completely.
Yeah, surgery is its own special, I think, animal in a lot of ways, and it unfortunately is so common amongst our community. But it's hard to prepare for it because, again, even Robin's experience with a bag, Amy, if you ever need that experience, like even if Robin told you about it, like yours would be different.
Right.
So that makes it a little bit hard. But you do have people that can at least tell you what to expect.
Yeah.
And empathize with what's going on.
What's the one thing that you want other patients to know? And
I'm
it
glad
doesn't
you
have to
remembered
be
that.
like specific to like disease specific, just I guess anybody living with a chronic illness, but with your experience, what's the one thing that you think everybody should know?
There's so many things I could say, but I will say go to therapy, because even if you don't think that you need it, something's going to come out. Well, really.
Something's going to come out. That actually kind of,
sometimes literally, sometimes not.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I get on the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. So many tips from you, Amy. Oh my gosh. No, I agree with you. I think that this it will bring out things regardless of whether you want it to or not. So my dog who has IBD is leaving me after farting. So just as a note, this is great.
You just got crop dusted.
I did. I straight did. And now he's looking at me like, haha.
So I'm glad I have cats. They don't fart, or they don't smell. I don't know.
That's true. I don't think my cat is. Well, okay. I think my cat may have farted at some point, but that may also, again, you can always blame the dog. So
yeah.
Well, very good. And again, Amy, thank you so much. This was really fun to talk to you. And we are excited to be back in the saddle.
This was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Like I said, hasn't been a super easy couple months, but this was such a highlight and a high point to talk to you both. I really appreciate you asking.
Yay. Well, thank you for that. That makes us feel better about being back in the saddle.
Because this is really more of a great show. I mean, honestly.
This is super profesh. Really.
Oh my God, Robin, I'm gonna make sure I add that. I'm gonna leave that in. Cheers. If you like this episode, please rate, review, and share with your friends. We could use all the love we can get. Thanks, guys.